Welcome to a podcast from the Phoenix Esoteric Society. We hope you enjoy today's topic.
This week's podcast is on some notes and ideas that I put together from a book called The Fourth Dimension, Sacred Geometry, Alchemy, and Mathematics by Rudolf Steiner. This isn't really a book by Rudolf Steiner. It's actually a series of lectures on the fourth dimension, sacred geometry, alchemy, and mathematics. These lectures are dated from 1905 through 1922. They're all different lectures and at different times, but they come together to give us a unique perspective on the fourth dimension of time. Rudolf Steiner believes that the fourth dimension of reality, or what he calls dimensional space or the astral world, goes way beyond our ordinary sense perceptions of reality. He says that mathematicians cannot take a step into the fourth dimensional reality because they can only arrive at conclusions from what can be thought. So what we're hearing here is that thought is a limiting factor to getting into the fourth dimensional reality of consciousness, or what I would call consciousness. He hasn't said that. He obviously believes that thought and consciousness both play a major role in the fourth dimension of reality. According to Rudolf Steiner, human beings are not three-dimensional, but actually four-dimensional beings. He said that we live in the fourth dimension like we are ice floating on a sea of ice water. I find that really interesting. Therefore, it's the simulated objects we perceive outside of ourselves that are creating within our consciousness the simulation of reality. I'm using the word simulation, but I don't know if Rudolf Steiner has a simulation theory. I may come across it. If anyone else knows about this, please leave a comment in the links and the information where you got it so I can take a look. He talks about polarities in terms of dynamic forces that give inherent objects a life force, and he believes that the objects that we are perceiving with our consciousness and the life force within these objects is actually bringing these objects to life in our consciousness. When we look at the double slit experiment, I put a link down below to that if you're not familiar with it, we realize that for particles that we call reality to assemble in our conscious, there has to be an observer. And when there is not an observer, these particles scatter. This is basically basic quantum mechanics. We can think of it as chaos forming through consciousness, but going back to a state of chaos without conscious observation. Rudolf Steiner also talks about beings that we encounter in the so-called astral world. I believe this astral world he is referring to is a world of another dimension or of the fourth dimension, although it's clear that he believes that there are many dimensions and worlds within those dimensions. What's really interesting is that he says in the fourth dimension that everything is backwards. Words and numbers are completely opposite in the fourth dimension. For example, the number 467 is actually read as 764. Everything has a mirror image within the fourth dimension. Therefore, everything would be perceived by us in the third dimension as either upside down or sticking straight up. The roots of a tree would be in the sky instead of in the ground. Each person would have another image of themselves protruding from the top of their head with their feet sticking straight up into the sky. Rudolf Steiner believes that we have to learn to read and understand numbers and even math backwards to make any sense of the fourth dimension. It would seem that the reason scientists and mathematics are currently stuck in the third dimension, and have been for a long time, is that they're using science and mathematics that don't take into consideration how things work in the fourth dimension or in any other dimensions. They are applying three-dimensional science and math on a different four-dimensional space. And it just makes sense that if there are other dimensions of time and space, that they would be completely different from the one that we are currently perceiving in three dimensions. Another thing that I found really interesting is that in the fourth dimension, he said the old merges with the new. Nothing is born and then becomes old. In the fourth dimension, or astral world, things are old and then they become new using our current third dimension. Everything in this astral world, or fourth dimension, and in other dimensions is actually radiating from us in this dimension. Our thoughts, words, and our actions are causing things within a four-dimensional space or astral world to be born and then come back into our third dimensional reality and affect us. This is the idea of karma. Everything that we're doing in this dimensional space has a life somewhere else, and it's coming back, and we're having to deal with it in this dimension. This is a very interesting idea because the science is now starting to figure out the past influences the future, and the future influences the past, and there's no time and space between them. Rudolf Steiner talks about this in this lecture, which was written in 1905. We just think about the past influencing the present at all times, but in reality, the past and present and the future are all influencing each other at the same time. They are synchronous. They're happening at once all around us. We just don't interpret it. We don't feel it because we use a concept of time, but he said, there's streams flowing in all directions around us outward, and streams going in all directions inwards towards us as well, from these other dimensions that we are actually creating. Rudolf Steiner talks about reaching a state in esoteric development where we must live through a phenomenon in this world called the guardian of the threshold. The guardian of the threshold basically is just facing our future life because our dimensional or astral future lies beyond this threshold. In other words, every thought that we've ever had, every action that we've ever taken, and everything that we've ever achieved in this life, at some point, we will come face to face with all of its good, bad, and everything. The guardian of the threshold, which also appears to be our own creation, will make the decision how we enter these other dimensions. So therefore, the very us that we've created in other dimensions will then judge us together, whether we evolve to another dimension or maybe possibly even de-evolve to another dimension. But Rudolf Steiner doesn't get into that. Well, not yet at least. According to Rudolf Steiner, people see apparitions that they cannot interpret because they do not know that they must read them in reverse. For instance, they do not know that a wild animal attacking them must be interpreted as a reflection of an internal quality. He believes a person's astral forces and passions appear in a great variety of animal forms. This led me to think about how we could be creating the other people in this world that attack us, or at least drawing them in with our energy. He described how recently disembodied individuals who still possess all their passions, drives, wishes, and desires are not a pretty sight. Such people, although they are no longer in possession of physical and inferior bodies, can still retain all the astral elements that bind them into the physical world, and can only be satisfied through a physical body, which obviously they don't have. Any astral world urges take on animal shapes. As a human being is incarnated into a physical world, the shape of the astral body conforms more or less to the human physical body. When the material body is gone, however, the animal nature, urges, desires, and passions is revealed in the forms they assume in the astral world. Therefore, an individual is a reflection of their animal nature, urges, desires, and passions. The individual is a reflection of his or her urges because these astral beings can also make use of other bodies. This is why it's dangerous to allow mediums to go into trance without presence of a clairvoyant who can ward off evil. I don't think it's a good thing for anyone to actually go into a trance and to have something else inherit their body. We don't know enough about anything else, including our own consciousness, I think, for that to be safe. But that's just my opinion. It's obvious that Rudolf Steiner believes that consciousness is creating our reality, but also other dimensions of reality as well. The closest one of them to us is the fourth dimension, and this would make sense. I realize that some of these ideas seem on the fringe of science and science fiction, but as I pointed out, there is a correlation between the past, present, and future all existing together that correlates with this article and current science. The main reason I created the Phoenix Esoteric Society was to be able to examine science and consciousness in a different way than what mainstream corporate-funded science is doing. Rudolf Steiner revolutionized education, the Waldorf school system, which is still in operation worldwide. He proposed extensive social reforms through the establishment of a threefold social order in which the cultural, political, and economic realms would be largely independent. His work in medicine led to the development of a broad range of complementary medications and supportive artistic and biographic therapies, as well as numerous homes for children and adults with developmental disabilities, including those of the Campbell movement, currently still found in Africa, Europe, and in North America. In 1921, a year before his death, pharmacists and physicians gathered under Rudolf Steiner's guidance to create a pharmaceutical company called Weleda, which now distributes natural medical products worldwide. I hope I pronounced that correctly. At around the same time, Dr. Ida Wegman founded the first anthroposophic medical clinic, now called the Ida Wegman Clinic, in Switzerland. His two Goetheum buildings have also been widely cited as masterpieces of modern architecture even today. He created an ecological and sustainable approach to agriculture that increased soil fertility without the use of chemical fertilizers and pesticides, which is still being used very successfully today. He also wrote 4 mystery plays between 1909 and 1913 and 4 occult science books, which make up what is called anthroposophy, which is still an organization today. Rudolf Steiner's collected works make up about 400 volumes, including his writings, about 40 volumes, and over 6,000 lectures, many of which are online and have been turned into books. All of this, and the man is almost completely forgotten today, and his scientific, philosophic, and occult science work and ideas are not even considered or looked at. I think it's important to examine Rudolf Steiner's work and other occult scientists who explored their own inner dimensions of consciousness beyond what most people are capable of and can do. They can then bring back this information to us to use in our own occult science research and study. I think that the results and accomplishments of his life's work speak volumes for what one man was capable of by immersing into the deepest layers and fabric of his own consciousness. Because this is not only where everything we understand as reality originates, but this is where it's stored as well. Thank you for joining me.
This has been a podcast from the Phoenix Esoteric Society. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube page and check out more information at our website at phoenixesotericsociety.com.